Hello, everybody. I wanted to point out something very interesting. So I've been accumulating all the things that I want to present in the chapter one analysis video. One of the things I came back to was Carthage, because there is a story there presented in chapter one about the two back skins of two satyr women that were hairy. Anyways, in the book, the name is listed as Cartagena. In English, the name appears as Carthage, and I was researching why there's a difference, trying to determine if both cities are the same city associated with the Phoenicians. And I came across Carthage, ancient city, Tunisia. Just a brief introduction to the city. Carthage, Phoenician Cart Hadasht, Latin Carthago, great city of antiquity on the north coast of Africa, now a residential suburb of the city of Tunis, Tunisia. According to tradition, Carthage was founded by the Phoenicians of Tyre in 814 BCE. Its Phoenician name means new town. New town. Wow, new town. New England, New York, New Mexico. You're starting to see a pattern now. All these new towns that appeared in the United States in the 1800s, 1700s, states, cities. Wow. The archaeological site of Carthage was added to UNESCO's World Heritage List in 1979. Carthage was probably not the earliest Phoenician settlement in the region. Utica may have predated it by half a century, and various traditions concerning the foundation of Carthage were current among the Greeks, who called the city Carchedon. The Roman tradition is better known, however, because of the Aeneid, which tells the city's foundation by the Tyrian princess Dido, who fled from her brother Pygmalion, historical king of Tyre. The inhabitants of Carthage were known to the Romans as Poeni, a derivation from the word Phoenikes, or Phoenicians, from which the adjective Punic is derived. The date of the foundation of Carthage was probably exaggerated by the Carthaginians themselves, for it does not necessarily agree with the archaeological data. Noting nothing earlier than the last quarter of the 8th century BC has been discovered, a full century later than the traditional foundation's date. There's a map of where it's at. It's very close to interesting map. I'm not sure how to interpret it. I don't want to go to Google Earth right now. That's not what I'm trying to point at. You'll be surprised by what I'm trying to point at. The Phoenicians selected the locations of their maritime colonies with great care, focusing on the quality of harbors and their proximity to trade routes. The site chosen for Carthage in the center of the shore of the Gulf of Tunis was ideal. The city was built on a triangular peninsula, covered with low hills and backed by the Lake of Tunis, with its safe anchorage and abundant supply of fish. This location offered access to the Mediterranean, but was shielded from many of the violent storms that afflicted other Mediterranean ports. The site of the city was well protected and easily defensible, and its proximity to the Strait of Sicily placed it at a strategic bottleneck in east-west Mediterranean trade. Keep in mind, this is Britannica.com. This is official accepted history. The ancient citadel, the Bursa, was on a low hill overlooking the sea. Some of the earliest tombs have been found there, though nothing remains of Carthage's domestic and public buildings. This is the ruins of the ancient baths. Now it gets really interesting. Although Punic wealth was legendary, the standard of cultural life enjoyed by the Carthaginians may have been below that of the larger cities of the classical world. So now it's talking about material wealth versus spiritual wealth. Hmm. Punic interests were turned towards commerce rather than art, of course, just like the Jews of today. And Carthage controlled much of the western trade in the luxurious purple dye from the murex shell. Arguments about the virtual lack of Punic literature are largely moot. When the Romans sacked the city, Carthage's libraries and archives were either given to Numidian kings or did not survive the destruction. One notable exception was the work of a Carthaginian writer named Mago, whose 28 books on agriculture were translated into Greek by Cassius Dionysius and later cited by Romans such as Lucius Junius Moderatus Columella. In Roman times, Punic beds, cushions, and mattresses were regarded as luxuries, and Punic joinery and furniture were copied. Much of the revenue of Carthage came from its exploitation of the silver mines of North Africa and southern Spain, begun as early as 800 BCE near Gadir, modern Cadiz, Spain, and in the 3rd century BCE near what is now Cartagena, Spain. From the middle of the 3rd century to the middle of the 2nd century BCE, Carthage was engaged in a series of wars with Rome. These wars, which are known as the Punic Wars, ended in the complete defeat of Carthage by Rome and the expansion of Roman control in the Mediterranean world. When Carthage finally fell in 146 BCE, the site was plundered and burned. These are some of the ruins of Carthage. Note the brick construction. In 122 BCE, the Roman Senate entrusted Gaius Gracchus and Marcus Fulvius Flaccus with the foundation of a colony on the site of Carthage. Though the venture was largely unsuccessful, Julius Caesar later sent a number of landless citizens there, and in 29 BCE, Augustus centered the administration of the Roman province of Africa at the site. Is this where we got Africa from? Therefore, it became known as Colonia Julia Carthago, and it soon grew prosperous enough to be ranked with Alexandria and Antioch. Carthage became a favorite city of the emperors, though none resided there. Of its history during the later empire, very little is known, but in the mid-3rd century the city began to decline. I apologize, this site is very slow, so many ads. So that was the mosaic. Here we go. From the end of the 2nd century, it had its own Christian bishop, and among its luminaries were the church fathers Tertullian and Saint Cyprian. Throughout the 4th and 5th centuries, Carthage was troubled by the Donatist and Pelagian controversies. Pelagian, dun 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 dun. In 439 CE, the Vandal ruler Gaiseric entered almost unopposed and plundered the city. Gelimer, the last Vandal king, was defeated nearby Decimum by a Byzantine army under Belisarius, who entered Carthage unopposed in 533 CE. After its capture by the Arabs in 705, Carthage was totally eclipsed by the new town of Tunis. Though Roman Carthage was destroyed, much of its remains can be traced, including the outline of many fortifications and an aqueduct. The former Bursa area was adorned with a large temple dedicated to Juno, Jupiter, and Minerva, and near it stood a temple to Asclepius. Also on the Bursa site stood an open-air portico, from which the finest Roman sculptures at Carthage have survived. Additional remains of the Roman town include an odeum, another theatre constructed by Hadrian, an amphitheatre modeled on the Roman Colosseum, numerous baths and temples, and a circus. And that's a Roman villa. Look at the pillar. I see the pillars in San Jose everywhere I go. Anyways, a brief note here to Pelagian controversies. I won't look at Donatists. I don't want to waste too much time. But I will look at these Pelagian controversies. Pelagianism. Keep in mind, we're still on Britannica.com. Pelagianism, also called Pelagian heresy, a 5th century Christian heresy taught by Pelagius and his followers that stressed the essential goodness of human nature and the freedom of the human will. Pelagius was concerned about the slack moral standards among Christians, and he hoped to improve their conduct by his teachings, rejecting the arguments of those who claimed that they sinned because of human weakness. He insisted that God made human beings free to choose between good and evil, and that sin is a voluntary act committed by a person against God's law. Celestius, a disciple of Pelagius, denied the Church's doctrine of original sin and the necessity of infant baptism. Pelagianism was opposed by Augustine, Bishop of Hippo, who asserted that human beings could not attain righteousness by their own efforts and were totally dependent upon the grace of God. Condemned by 2 councils of African bishops in 416 and again at Carthage in 418, Pelagius and Celestius were finally excommunicated in 418. Pelagius' later fate is unknown. The controversy, however, was not over. Julian of Eclanum continued to assert the Pelagian view and engaged Augustine in literary polemic until the latter's death in 430. Julian himself was finally condemned with the rest of the Pelagian party at the Council of Ephesus in 431. Another heresy known as semi-Pelagianism flourished in southern Gaul until it was finally condemned at the Second Council of Orange in 529. So, what have I presented here? We have the city Carthage, founded by the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians, who are the modern-day Jews. Their main interest was making money, material wealth. They had no interest in the spiritual wealth. At some point, there was some wars. These wars continued with this individual named Pelagius. Okay, so who is this Pelagius, according to Britannica.com? Pelagius, born c. 354, probably Britain, died after 418, possibly Palestine. And here we have the fucking Jewish invasion of Palestine, and they're trying to justify it that it used to be Jewish, when the Jewish today are not even Semites. The Jews today are not. I hope you guys know that. I hope. Anyways. Monk and theologian whose heterodox theological system known as Pelagianism emphasized the primacy of human effort in spiritual self. So in essence, I am a modern day Pelagius. Does that make me religious? No, it does not. But it does mean that I am trying to emphasize spiritual salvation. And it all starts on the inside. And according to this article, we have to abandon original sin. We have to analyze what that is too. First, about this guy. Coming to Rome in 380 CE, Pelagius, though not a priest, became a highly regarded spiritual director for both clergy and... That's exactly what I am. I'm not a priest, but I'm a highly spiritual director. Yes, I'm trying to teach everyone how to embrace the spirituality of life, the side we have all abandoned for the materialistic side of life. Anyways, the rigorous asceticism of his adherents acted as a reproach to the spiritual sloth of many Roman Christians whose moral standards greatly distressed him. So boom, right there, we know that Christianity, since it was introduced, was meant to corrupt the spiritual component of the human being. Spirituality died with the introduction of Christianity. Right from the horse's mouth, Britannica.com. He blamed Rome's moral laxity on the doctrine of divine grace that he heard the bishop cite from the Confessions of St. Augustine, who in his prayer for continence beseeched God to grant whatever grace the divine will determine. Pelagius attacked this teaching on the grounds that it imperiled the entire moral law and soon gained a considerable following at Rome. Henceforth, his closest collaborator was a lawyer in Roman times, named Celestius. So Pelagius and Celestius. After the fall of Rome to the Visigoth chieftain Alaric in 410, Pelagius and Celestius went to Africa. So it seems that in 410, the Visigoths, who come from the Goths who were the Getae, temporarily took power again, and the message of the Pelagians was trying to be reintroduced. Pelagius and Celestus went to Africa. There they encountered the hostile criticism of Augustine, who published several denunciatory letters concerning their doctrine, particularly Pelagius' insistence on man's basically good moral nature and on man's own responsibility for voluntarily choosing Christian asceticism for his spiritual advancement. Pelagius left for Palestine in 412. There, although accused of heresy, so clearly the Pelagian spiritual ideology did not have a place in Palestine in 412. At the Synod of Jerusalem in 415, he succeeded in clearing himself and avoiding censure. In response to further attacks from Augustine and the Latin biblical scholar Jerome, Pelagius wrote the Libero Arbitrio on free will in 416, which resulted in the condemnation of his teaching by 2 African councils. In 417, Pope Innocent I endorsed the condemnations. So boom, right there, we know that the Church, the Roman Church, the Vatican, if you will, was back on the side against the Pelagians. So it seems in 410, the Pelagians briefly regained power, but this lasted less than 5 years, 7 years. So this Pope Innocent I condemned and excommunicated Pelagius and Celestius. Innocent's successor Zosimus at first pronounced him innocent on the basis of Pelagius' Libellus Fidei, which translates the brief statement of faith, but after renewed investigation at the Council of Carthage in 418, Zosimus confirmed the council's 9 canons condemning Pelagius. Nothing more is known of Pelagius after this date. The Council of Nine, Zosimus Council of Nine Canons. I gotta look into that. Let's see briefly who this Celestius guy is. One of the first and probably the most outstanding of the disciples of the British theologian. So Pelagius is considered British. Interesting. We all know he's not, but perhaps it's a reincarnation? Interesting. Perhaps he never died because of eternal life? Interesting. Like Pelagius, Celestius was practicing law in Rome when they met. In reaction to contemporary immorality, they turned from temporal to religious pursuits, and their reforming views found much support around. When the Goths menaced Rome about so the Goths, the Visigoths. So in essence, the battle between good and evil never stopped. And here, briefly, in around 409, 410, the Visigoths retook control, or good. The good values in humanity retook control, but then it was taken away by the bad side again. Let's see who this Saint Augustine is. Sounds like a total douchebag with too much power. Saint Augustine, also called Saint Augustine of Hippo, original Latin name Aurelius Augustinus, born November 13th, 354, in Numidia, now Algeria. Interesting. One of the Latin fathers of the Church and perhaps the most significant Christian thinker after St. Paul. So here we have a direct link to the perversion of Christianity. This motherfucker named St. Augustine, who is a saint today, who introduced the idea of original sin rather than the moral principles of good humanity that Pelagius was trying to introduce. Very interesting. So, okay, let's clarify this original sin thing. Come on. Stop. Sophie, help me out here. Original sin. Necessity of infant baptism, what, cutting off the tip of the penis? You motherfucker, you started this shit? Wish I could go back in time just to strangle you. So, original sin. In Christian doctrine, the condition or state of sin into which each human being is born. We are born into sin? That's what original sin is? This is what the motherfucker was preaching? Well, Pelagian was teaching that no, we have the choice to be good or bad. Wow. So it seems like this is where the origins of the perversion of humanity are. This original sin theology by Saint Augustine of Numidia, around 400 something, assuming the timelines are correct. Yeah, motherfucker. Traditionally, the origin has been ascribed to the sin of the first man, Adam, who disobeyed God in eating the forbidden fruit of knowledge of God, of good and evil, and in consequence transmitted his sin and guilt by heredity to his descendants. The doctrine has its basis in the Bible. Although the human condition, suffering, death, and a universal tendency towards, and I don't have this tendency, is accounted for by the story of the fall of Adam in the early chapters of the book of Genesis, the Hebrew scriptures say nothing about the transmission of heredity. So the Hebrews themselves didn't say nothing about it. Even they got corrupted. So the original Jews were good. It's the invader Jews, just like the invaded Christians. Wow. So we're talking about people that assumed the identity of the local people and genocided the local peoples out. In the Gospels, there are no more than allusions to the notion of the fall of man. Clearly, this fucking St. Augustine motherfucker. Ah. The doctrine is the prerequisite for the Christian understanding of the meaning of Jesus' crucifixion and atonement. Despite its importance for understanding Jesus' sacrifice, the doctrine of original sin has been minimized as no, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. Wow. Perversion of humanity. See, the way we think. It seems like these are the origins of the perversion of human thought. Let's see the human nature aspect of this Pelagian guy. Human nature, fundamental dispositions and traits of humans. Theories about the nature of humankind form a part of every culture. In the West, one traditional question centered on whether humans are naturally selfish and competitive or social and altruistic. A broader problem is that of determining which ostensibly fundamental human dispositions and traits are natural and which are the result of some form of learning or socialization. Recent research in genetics, evolutionary biology, and cultural anthropology suggests that there is a complex interaction between genetically inherited factors and developmental and blah blah blah. Okay, where in this whole paragraph do we see the human nature associated to Pelagius over here? Nowhere, you Britannica fucking website bullshit. Half truth. I'm sorry. I apologize for my profanity. It's just I just found the source of corruption of humanity right here with Carthage, St. Augustine, and the Council of Nine that I'm gonna research later on. Alright, so let's see. I clicked on Pelagianism and this is what appeared. Until about 250, most Western Christian leaders, e.g. Irenaeus and Hippolytus, spoke Greek, not Latin. That's a lie. Or wait, Western Christian leaders? Yeah, that's probably true. I was thinking Eastern. The main Latin theology came primarily from such figures as Tertullian and Cyprian, Bishop of Carthage, 248 to 2. Wow, so this Carthage is really the mother of modern Christianity, the perverted Christianity. Interesting. Rather than from. So it is based on Judaism still. Haha, Christianity is Judaism. It's proven right here. Phoenicians, Talmud. Wow. Nothing said here about what Pelagianism is there? I think they messed up. I don't think they were supposed to include the name Pelagius. I just want to see one more thing, and I will move on to making chapter 1 analysis. Come on, buddy. Come on. We're almost done here. I should research the Carthaginian period. Okay. Punic Wars? No, that's not what I wanted to see. Council of Ephesus. Councils of Ephesus. 3 assemblies held in Asia Minor. Wow! There we go, back to Turkey. Definitely Pelagian area. So that's what happened. They were all Pelagians, and some of them were corrupted by power and gave up the spirituality of human nature, and they took over the world through Christianity and other methods. But essentially, materialism, original sin, and the removal of human nature, like proper morals and values. Interesting. Okay, so 3 assemblies held in Asia Minor to resolve problems of the early Christian church. Really? Asia Minor to resolve Christian issues? Wouldn't that be in Europe? What? In 190, Polycrates, bishop of Ephesus, convened a synod to establish the 14th of Nisan, the date of the Jewish Patsif, Jews again, as the official date of Easter. So Jewish influence established Easter too. Pope Victor I preferring the Sundays more. So there we go, Christianity related to Jewish, determining when holidays should be held. They were debating when Easter should be held, preferring a Sunday over another day. Wow! More convenient and desiring uniformity, repudiated this decision and separated the rebels from Rome. In 431, Pope Celestine I commissioned Cyril, Patriarch of Alexandria, isn't that Greece, to conduct proceedings against Nestorius, his longtime adversary, whose doctrine of two persons in Christ the Pope had previously condemned. When the blah blah blah, I have to dig deep into this. I won't get my answers here. Let's also see this. This Second Council of Orange, 529. 529, Second Council of Orange. The Second Council of Orange, or Second Synod, that's Jewish too, was held in 529 at Orange, France, which was then part of the Ostrogothic kingdom. The Ostrogoths, Goths, Geti, Pelagians. So they still had some influence. There was a divide in the freaking Pelagian rule. Some of them wanted all the power to themselves and to enslave humanity, which goes back to Jupiter. It affirmed much of the theology of Augustine of Hippo. There we go, that name again, the Saint Augustine. Wow, it made numerous proclamations against what later will come to be known as semi-Pelagian doctrine. More like the corruption of the Pelagian doctrine. See, it says semi-Pelagian thought stands in contrast to the earlier Pelagian teaching about salvation. In other words, infiltrators from within. Infiltrators from within. Pelagian theology was condemned at the 418 Council of Carthage, and these condemnations were ratified at the Council of Ephesus. Liberius. Attended by 14 bishops under the presidency of who? Caesarius of Arles? Saint Caesarius of Arles, sometimes called of Chalon, from his birthplace Chalon-sur-Saône, was the foremost ecclesiastic of his generation, Merovingian Gaul. The Merovingians corrupted the Pelagians. Wow! Or wait, perhaps I'm mistaken, I'm not sure. So who are these bishops? Julianus Amartellus, bishop. Looks like we got France and other places up in here. Conclusions of the council. The question at hand was whether a modern form of Pelagianism could be affirmed or if the doctrines of Augustine were to be... There you go! This was the battle to determine how humanity would move forward. On a good path or a bad path. We all know which path was taken. The bad one, right? The determination of the council could be considered semi-Augustinian. It defined that faith, though a free act, resulted even in its beginnings from the grace of God, enlightening the human mind and enabling belief. In other words, we don't have free thought. God gives us our thought process. That's a lie. And it's ironic that yesterday I was watching a movie. I didn't get a chance to finish. What was it called? The Bandersnatch. Weird movie, but worth watching. However, it also explicitly denied double predestination of the equal ultimacy variety, stating, "We not only do not believe that any are foreordained to evil by the power of God, but even state with utter abhorrence that if there are those who want to believe so evil a thing, they are anathema." The document links grace with baptism. So cutting off the tip of your child's penis is grace, which was not a controversial subject at the time. It received papal approbation. The canons of the Second Council influenced the interpretation of Augustine in the later medieval Western Church, such as by Thomas Aquinas. Here we have another person with the eagle in his name. Look at this fool. He looks so freaking weird with that semi-cone head. What kind of hairstyle is that? He was an Italian Dominican friar, Catholic priest, and a doctor of the church. He was an immensely influential philosopher, theologian, and jurist in the tradition of scholasticism, within which he's also known as the Doctor Angelicus and the Doctor Communicum. So this motherfucker represents what I should believe in. I say fuck you and your beliefs. Classical Protestantism affirms the theology of the Second Council. It has appealed to its conclusions to make a case that the Lutheran and Calvinist doctrines of sola gratia, sola fide, solus Christus, and original sin as total depravity. The perversion of the Christian church. This whole video is the perversion of the Christian church. Wow. Wow. Had already been taught much earlier than the 16th century Protestant Reformation. Yeah, we're talking about the years 300, 500. Maybe there is 1,000 year gap. Arminian. Who are these Armenian people? The Dutch. So they were in on it too. Look at his cone head type head. Massive forehead. Wig style. Also, Council of Orange, historically significant, blah blah blah. I think I proved my point, folks. Straight from the horse's mouth. Britannica.com. So it seems the Pelagian ideology died around the 500s. 400s, 500s. The Visigoths, Ostrogoths seem to have been corrupted from the inside. Wow. To be continued.